My name is Nora Callahan. I am 33 years old, and I had been awake for over 20 hours by the time I pulled into the gravel lot of the Silver Birch Lodge on the shore of Lake Charlevoix, Michigan. 9 months. That's how long I had been gone. A deployment that started with a duffel bag and ended with a folder of medals I hadn't opened yet. My uniform still smelled like the transport plane. I hadn't even had time to change. There was a banner strung between two pine trees at the entrance. "Welcome home, Captain Callahan," it read, the letters a little crooked, clearly printed at a copy shop in a hurry. I remember standing there for a second, just looking at it, feeling something in my chest loosen for the first time in months. My grandfather had planned this. Of course he had. Colonel Harold Callahan, U.S. please. Army, retired, did not do anything halfway. I walked into the lobby with my duffel over one shoulder, still in my ACUs, my boots leaving faint trail dust on the polished wood floor. The woman at the front desk smiled at first, the kind of smile people give a soldier in uniform, warm and a little uncertain, and then her smile faded as she scrolled through her screen. "I'm sorry," she said. "There's no reservation under Callahan. Not for you, I mean. There's a block of rooms, but they're all already assigned." I asked her to check it in, and she did. Changed. That was when I heard my brother's voice behind me, too loud for a hotel lobby, pitched for an audience. "There's no mistake," Ryan said. He had his phone raised, filming like he was capturing content for later instead of standing in front of his own sister. "We reserved the rooms for me, Chloe and Tyler. Mom and Dad have theirs too. We're the ones who've actually been here, Nora, every week, while you were. Wherever you were." Chloe laughed beside him. That bright performative laugh she saved for cameras. "We're the real family that shows up," she said. My parents stood a few feet away, near the stone fireplace, and neither of them said a word. My mother looked at the floor. My father looked at his shoes. And my nephew, Tyler, 8 years old, stood between his parents in the little collared shirt someone had clearly ironed for the occasion, looking from me to them and back again, utterly lost. I want to tell you that I felt rage. I didn't, not yet. What I felt was the particular, specific silence that comes after 9 months of sleeping 4 hours a night in a country where every sound could mean something. I had learned to hold still until I understood the terrain. So I held still. Several people near the check-in desk had gone quiet, phones half raised, sensing a scene. Somewhere behind me, I heard the faint click of someone else's camera. My brother seemed to enjoy that the most. I did not argue. I did not ask why no one had warned me there would be no room. I did not remind them that Grandpa had built this entire welcome home weekend around me, or that I had spent the last 36 hours in transit specifically to be here on time. I adjusted the strap of my duffel bag, looked my brother in the eye, and said the only 2 words that felt true. "Roger that." His smile faltered for half a second. "Don't be dramatic. There's a Best Western 15 minutes up the road. I already have somewhere," I said. "It's called home." I walked out before anyone could stop me past the banner with my name misspelled slightly at the edge where the ink had run. Past the fire truck, someone had arranged to salute my convoy that never came, because there was no convoy anymore, just me and a rental car and a bag I hadn't unpacked in 3 days. 3 hours later, sitting alone in the diner booth off I-75 because I couldn't yet make myself drive the rest of the way home, my phone lit up with 31 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and a family group chat scrolling faster than I could read it. Then, in the middle of all that noise, one new message appeared. It was from my grandfather. I opened it. And everything that came after, the calls that turned from accusations into pleading, the collapse that followed my family for the next 4 months, all of it started with what he wrote in that message. But before I tell you what it said, I want you to picture the diner, the gray Michigan sky through the window, the coffee going cold in front of me, and ask yourself, what time is it where you are right now? I want to know how far this story has to travel to find someone who understands it. My phone rang again before I could finish my coffee. Ryan. I declined it. He called a second time, immediately, then a third. On the 4th attempt, he switched to a group video call, and I only answered because I could hear Tyler crying somewhere in the background, thin and confused. "Nora, turn the car around," Ryan snapped before I could even say hello. "You're embarrassing everyone. There were reporters here, Nora, from the Charlevoix County Press. Grandpa invited them." Chloe's voice cut in from somewhere beside him. We were trying to make this weekend nice for people who actually have responsibilities here. You're single, you don't have a kid to think about, you could have just figured something out. Then my mother, in the flat, practiced tone she'd used on me since I was a teenager. Your brother has a wife and a son. Their comfort matters more right now. My father said nothing at all. That silence hurt worse than anything Ryan or Chloe had said, because it confirmed what I'd already understood standing in that lobby. This wasn't a scheduling error. This was a decision the whole family had quietly made and no one had bothered to tell me about, not even the part where I was supposed to find out by walking into a room with my name on a banner and no bed underneath it. I looked out the window at the gray highway and felt the old instinct rise up in me, the urge to list every reason I deserved better. I could have reminded them that I sent half my combat pay home during 3 separate deployments to help cover Ryan's mortgage when his commission checks were thin. I could have mentioned that I had paid off my own student loans on an officer's salary, built a retirement account from scratch, and never once asked Grandpa for a cent beyond what the Army itself provided. I could have listed every quiet thing I had handled for this family from 6,000 miles away, coordinating Dad's cardiologist appointment over a satellite call at 0300, catching the mistake in Ryan's tax filing that would have cost him $4,000. None of it would have changed how they saw me. In their minds, my independence hadn't earned respect. It had made me easy to leave out. Ryan's voice rose again. Tyler's upset. He thought you were staying with us this weekend. Then Tyler's small voice, uncertain, cutting through everything else. Aunt Nora, are you mad at me? My anger disappeared for exactly 1 second. No, sweetheart, I said. None of this is your fault. Not one bit of it. Chloe grabbed the phone. Then prove it. Cummy grabbed the phone. Then prove it. Come back. No, I said. I'm going home. Ryan laughed without any humor in it at all. Grandpa paid for this whole weekend. You don't get to ruin it because nobody handed you a free suite. The hypocrisy of that sentence was almost impressive coming from him. Our grandfather, Harold Callahan, had built a hardware supply company from a single truck after his own service in Vietnam, and over the years he had quietly funded nearly everything Ryan considered proof of his own success. He'd co-signed the mortgage on Ryan and Chloe's house. He covered Tyler's private school tuition. He paid for the lease on their SUV. And for almost 6 years, he had wired a temporary monthly transfer into Ryan's account that had never actually stopped being temporary. He also subsidized my parents' assisted living community in Traverse City and their supplemental insurance on top of everything else. This weekend, the banner, the lodge, the whole homecoming had been his idea. He told me on our last phone call, back in March, that he was too worn out to fly out to see me overseas, but he wanted one photograph of the whole family together when I finally came home. He'd asked me personally to make sure I came straight from the airfield. What Ryan didn't know was that Grandpa had been quietly questioning the entire arrangement for months. Back in March, during a video call while I was still overseas, he'd shared his screen and shown me a spreadsheet, every transfer, every tuition payment, every mortgage assist, going back 6 years. He'd asked me, flat out, whether I thought the money was helping anyone stand up straighter or just helping them stay comfortable while leaning. I'd told him the truth. It was keeping them comfortable, not responsible. He'd gone quiet for a long moment, and then he said something I didn't fully understand until I was sitting in that diner months later. Money can pull a man out of one bad season, Nora, but if it pulls him out of every consequence he's ever earned, it stops being a rope and starts being a cage. At the time, I thought he was speaking in generalities, the way old soldiers sometimes do. Sitting in that booth with cold coffee and a family group chat exploding on my screen, I understood he had already been quietly preparing to act. He just hadn't told me when. I ended the group call, paid for my coffee, and called him directly. He answered on the second ring. I gave him only the facts, the way I'd give a sitrep to a battalion commander. The missing reservation. Ryan's comment on camera. Chloe's laugh. My parents' silence. My decision to leave. I did not cry. I did not ask him to do anything about it. He was quiet for several seconds. Then, did any of them try to stop you? No, sir. Did anyone apologize? No, sir. And the boy? I told Tyler it wasn't his fault. Grandpa exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. Good. Children shouldn't carry debts. Adults ran up. I heard the faint click of a keyboard somewhere behind his voice. Grandpa, what are you doing? Reviewing decisions I should have made a long time ago. I don't want you doing this because you think I need revenge. This isn't revenge, Nora, he said, and his voice had the same steadiness I remembered from him explaining land navigation to me when I was 12. This isn't accounting. The line went quiet again. Then, go find a hotel. Eat something. Don't answer any of them for the next 3 hours. Why 3 hours? Because by then, he said, they'll understand exactly what the word useless costs. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I found a Best Western off the interstate, the same one Ryan had mockingly suggested, and I laughed a little, a short, tired sound at the absurdity of that when I checked in. I ordered room service. I barely touched and opened my laptop instead, pulling up the retirement account I'd been funding since my second deployment. The numbers were unremarkable in the best possible way. Steady. Boring. Mine. My phone, face down on the nightstand, kept lighting up the ceiling every few minutes. Ryan sent a photo of Tyler sitting on the edge of a hotel bed, head down. "Look what you're doing to him," the caption read. Chloe sent a voice memo accusing me of ruining the homecoming content she'd already scheduled to post. My mother emailed a list of nearby hotels, all more expensive than the one I was already in, with the note, "You can clearly afford one of these, so stop acting wounded." My father finally wrote 3 words into the group chat: "Family requires sacrifice." Oh, I typed 4 different responses and deleted every one of them. They didn't want a resolution. They wanted my compliance, wrapped up in language that made compliance sound like virtue. I closed my laptop instead. 20 minutes later, a calendar invite appeared in my inbox. Immediate family financial review. Every adult in the family was included. It would start in 15 minutes. Ryan called me 7 times before it began. On the 8th, he left a voicemail, his voice tight. "What did you tell him? Whatever you said, fix it right now." I joined the video call. I did not turn on my camera. Grandpa appeared on screen from his study, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. A printed folder open in front of him, the same posture I remembered from watching him go over quarterly reports at his kitchen table when I was a kid, except this time the numbers belonged to us. Ryan and Chloe were together in their hotel room. My parents sat side by side in theirs. Whatever confidence they carried in that lobby had already drained out of them. Grandpa began without any greeting at all. 2 years ago, I asked every household in this family to put together a plan to become financially self-sufficient. Nora submitted hers before she ever deployed, even though she receives no assistance from me at all. The rest of you either ignored the request or sent me something incomplete. Ryan leaned toward his camera. "This is supposed to be a homecoming, Grandpa. Do we really have to turn it into a business meeting?" "You turned it into a business matter," Grandpa said. "The moment you used money I provided to decide who counted as family and who didn't. I've watched the lobby footage." The room went silent. I'd forgotten the lodge had security cameras at every entrance. Of course it did. Grandpa had chosen the venue himself, an old business associate's property. The manager, a man Grandpa had known since before I was born, had called him within the hour after a front desk employee reported a soldier being humiliated in front of a crowd, on camera, by her own brother. Grandpa opened the folder. "Ryan, over the last 12 months, I've put $91,000 toward your mortgage under a gift letter I signed for the bank. $31,000 toward Tyler's tuition, $19,000 toward your vehicle lease, and $44,000 in direct transfers. That's $185,000, not counting this weekend." Ryan went pale. Chloe turned toward him. "You told me the transfers were less than half that." "Mom, Dad," Grandpa continued, "I've put $128,000 toward your community fees, insurance, and travel this year. You also signed a contract requiring a further $170,000 by January, assuming I would cover it, without ever confirming that with me." My father swallowed audibly. "You said you'd help." "I said I'd review it after receiving your budget. I never received one." My mother leaned forward. "Harold, this is about Nora being upset. We can apologize. There's no reason to threaten everyone's security over one bad weekend." Grandpa's expression hardened in a way I hadn't seen since I was a teenager and had lied to him about where I'd been one night. "Nora asked me for nothing," he said. "This decision is mine alone." He shared his screen. An email draft appeared, a formal notice attached. Effective the 1st of next month, every recurring transfer would stop. Room charges already incurred this weekend would be honored, but no future discretionary expenses would be covered. Ryan would have 30 days to work with the bank on refinancing before the gift letter's absence triggered a full income re-verification. My parents would need to renegotiate or cancel the community contract. Grandpa would continue covering only Tyler's basic medical coverage directly to the insurer for 6 months because, in his words, he refused to use a child as leverage in a fight between adults. Ryan stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor on camera. "You can't do this. We'll lose the house by spring." "You earn $78,000 a year, Ryan," Grandpa said. "You bought a house that cost $9,000 a month because you assumed my money had no end to it." Chloe started crying. "Please, I know what happened in that lobby looked terrible. We can fix it." "Nora, say something." I turned my camera on. "What would you like me to say?" "That you forgive us." "I haven't heard an apology yet." "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "We're all sorry." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Fine, I shouldn't have made the joke." "It wasn't a joke," I said. "It wasn't a dishoon. You made it standing in front of a camera, in front of my own nephew, on the one weekend our grandfather planned specifically to welcome me home from a war zone. He had nothing to say to that." My mother's voice cracked. "Our deposit could be forfeited, Nora. Our insurance costs will destroy us." "Your fear," Grandpa said quietly, "is not evidence that Nora wronged you. It's evidence that you built your lives on money you didn't earn." He pressed send. A notification chimed on every screen at once. The decision was official. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then everyone spoke at once, Ryan demanding another month, Chloe begging for Tyler's tuition specifically, my parents warning that the stress alone could put my father back in the hospital. Grandpa let the noise build for almost a minute, and then he muted everyone but himself. "Tonight," he said, "you called the one self-supporting member of this family useless while standing inside a homecoming she made possible simply by surviving 9 months overseas and never once asking me to rescue her from anything. You've confused dependence with importance for a very long time. You're about to learn the difference." He ended the call. Almost instantly my phone filled up again, except this time the messages weren't about the lobby or the banner or the missing room. They were begging me to save their house, Tyler's school, the retirement contract, everything. 3 hours earlier, they had watched me walk out of that lodge without a flicker of concern. Now they needed me, not because they missed me, but because they believed, somehow, that I could talk their grandfather out of his own decision. I didn't answer any of it that night. I lay in that Best Western bed, staring at the ceiling fan, and thought about something my old drill sergeant used to say. Contempt turns to panic real quick. Once the person you've been dismissing stops standing between you and the consequences. I flew back to Fort Bragg 2 days later, once my leave officially started, with 109 unread messages waiting on my phone by the time I landed. Ryan moved through every stage of panic across a single week. His first messages were angry. I manipulated Grandpa, destroyed the homecoming, humiliated him in front of a reporter who, as it turned out, never even showed up. The next batch were strategic. He offered to pay for a room himself, retroactively, to post a public apology online. By the final wave, his voice on the voicemails had gone thin and unsteady. "Nora, please. The mortgage payment's due in 3 weeks. Just tell him you misunderstood." Chloe's messages were worse, honestly, because they were more truthful. She admitted they were carrying almost $41,000 in credit card debt Ryan didn't fully know about. She'd been using one card to make minimum payments on another, quietly assuming Grandpa's monthly transfer would eventually cover the gap. Their SUV lease was 2 months behind. Tyler's spring tuition was due before the holidays. "I know what I said was cruel," she wrote, "but please don't let Tyler lose his school because of one mistake I made." It hadn't been one mistake. It had been years of choices, protected the entire time by someone else's money. My parents called from the Lodge Business Center the next morning because, according to my mother, they were too distressed to sleep. My father explained they'd already paid a non-refundable $30,000 deposit on the assisted living contract and had simply assumed Grandpa would cover the rest, the way he always had. If they withdrew now, they'd lose the deposit. If they stayed, they couldn't afford the balance. My mother said, "You know we're too old to start over, Nora. Your father is 64. You're not helpless," I told her. Her tone sharpened instantly. "This is exactly why people think you're cold." There it was, the familiar punishment for refusing to fix a problem I hadn't caused. I ended the call. Back at Bragg, the Army did not pause to let me process any of it. I had a reintegration outbrief to complete, equipment to turn in. A company of soldiers who needed their captain present, not distracted. I remember sitting through a 90-minute briefing on operational readiness with my personal phone. Instinct had always been treated as proof I needed less consideration than everyone else. At noon, Grandpa called. His attorney had confirmed every past payment had been a voluntary gift, revocable without notice. He'd also discovered something new. Ryan had used the existence of Grandpa's gift letter as informal leverage while negotiating a home equity line the bank hadn't fully disclosed to Grandpa, not fraud exactly. But Ryan had let the loan officer believe the family support was permanent and guaranteed. Now the bank wanted updated proof of income within 30 days. "Did you know he was doing that?" I asked. "No," Grandpa said. "That's why this stopped being only about a hotel room a long time ago." He also mentioned that my parents had called 3 of my aunts, claiming I had pressured him into rewriting his will out of spite. Grandpa had responded by forwarding those same relatives a copy of the financial review notice and a written account from the lodge manager confirming what the security footage showed. I felt a flicker of satisfaction, immediately followed by discomfort. "I don't want the whole family seeing that footage, Grandpa. They already heard a version where you attacked everyone for no reason," he said. "Truth doesn't become cruelty just because it embarrasses the person telling the lie." That afternoon, Ryan posted something vague online about toxic relatives using an elderly veteran for control. He deleted it within the hour after 2 cousins commented that Grandpa had been supporting his household for 6 straight years. Chloe took down every photo from the homecoming weekend. My parents checked out of the lodge a day early, even though the rooms were already paid through Sunday, because, in my mother's words, they could no longer enjoy the trip. That evening, a florist delivered an enormous arrangement to my barracks quarters. The card read, "We're sorry. Please call Grandpa. Love, your family." No one mentioned the room. No one mentioned what Ryan had said on camera. Even their apology arrived itemized, like an invoice. I left the flowers in the common room for anyone who wanted them, made dinner in my quarters, and transferred my usual monthly amount into my investment account, same as I did every month, deployed or not. Nothing in my life had changed. That stability didn't make me feel superior to anyone. It made me understand, more clearly than I ever had, exactly how far my family's dependence on my grandfather had gone. Before I turned in that night, I listened to one final voicemail. Ryan sounded exhausted, his words slurred at the edges in a way I recognized but didn't want to name yet. "I know you think you won, but when Tyler asks why he has to leave his school, I'm telling him it started with you." For the first time since the lodge, my hands actually shook. Not because I believed him, because he'd found the one weapon that could still reach me, an 8-year-old who had done absolutely nothing wrong. I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Grandpa, and blocked Ryan's number that night. Over the following weeks, the crisis stopped being abstract and became measurable. Ryan listed the SUV for lease transfer and canceled 2 club memberships before the house even went on the market. When it did, the asking price came in under what they owed once fees and a second line of credit were factored in. Chloe's hidden card balance turned out to be closer to $54,000. Ryan started auditing every purchase she'd made in the last 2 years. She responded by showing him a folder of messages where he'd encouraged her to keep up appearances because his sales clients followed her online. Their fights grew loud enough that Tyler started spending most afternoons at Chloe's parents' house. Ryan kept his day job selling insurance, but he picked up night shifts delivering for a food app on weekends. A cousin spotted him outside a downtown building in a delivery jacket and mentioned it in the extended family group chat, which went silent immediately after. Ryan had spent years presenting himself as the responsible one, the provider, the son who'd stayed close to home while his sister disappeared overseas for months at a time. Now everyone understood how much of that image had been financed by someone else. The work itself wasn't the humiliating part. Honest work never is. What humiliated Ryan was being seen without the image he'd spent years building. My parents met with a financial counselor through the County Veterans Family Services Office, a benefit ironically connected to my own service, and formally withdrew from the assisted living contract. They lost the $30,000 deposit, sold several pieces of furniture, and started looking at a smaller condo outside Traverse City. My mother sent me photographs of each empty space in their old apartment, as if every gap were evidence I should feel guilty about. My father's messages were different. He'd started calculating, for what he admitted was the first time in years, exactly how long their actual savings would last without help. "We assumed your grandfather would always cover the gap," he wrote. That was irresponsible of us. It was the first sentence from either of them that didn't have a "but" attached to it. Back at Bragg, my battalion commander recommended me for a company command position starting in January. I should have felt only pride. Instead, I kept thinking about Tyler, at 5 years old, sitting next to me on my last leave before a deployment, asking why the number in his little savings account kept growing on its own. I'd drawn a crooked tree on a paper napkin from the mess hall and explained compound interest using apples, one apple growing into a whole orchard if you just left it alone long enough. Ryan had laughed and said, "Don't turn my kid into an accountant, Nora." Tyler had folded that napkin up and kept it in his backpack for almost a year. That memory is what finally pushed me into my first appointment at the VA. Dr. Yolanda Reyes had a small office with a window that looked out over a parking lot and a way of letting silence sit in the room without rushing to fill it. I told her I wasn't sorry for leaving that lobby. I told her I felt responsible anyway for everything that had happened since. She asked one question that stayed with me longer than anything else that year. "Did you create the instability, Captain Callahan? Or did your absence just reveal where it already was?" I knew the answer intellectually before I even sat down in that chair. Sitting with it emotionally, week after week, turned out to be a different kind of deployment entirely. 3 days after that first session, Chloe emailed me without copying Ryan. She said she'd contacted a lawyer about a legal separation. She wasn't asking me to reverse anything. Instead, she admitted something I hadn't expected. The lobby hadn't been spontaneous at all. Ryan had told her before I ever walked in that no room had been reserved for me and that I would probably just quietly pay for my own rather than cause a scene in front of everyone. Chloe had laughed at the time because she believed he was right. "We counted on your discipline to cover for our cruelty," she wrote. "I'm ashamed of that." I read that sentence 3 or 4 times. It was the first apology anyone had given me that actually named the harm instead of just apologizing for the consequences of it. I wrote back 2 lines, "Thank you for telling the truth. Please keep Tyler out of the blame from now on." That same evening, Ryan called from a number I didn't recognize, having clearly figured a way around the block. His words came slow, a little slurred, traffic noise behind him. "Chloe's leaving me," he said. "Mom and Dad blame me for everything. Grandpa won't take my calls. You happy now?" "No," I said. "You should be, though. You got everything you were pretending to have this whole time, real consequences instead of borrowed ones." He laughed, bitter. "You always thought you were better than the rest of us." "No, Ryan. I thought I was responsible for myself. You decided that made me useless." He went quiet, then the anger came back, sharper. "Because of you, this family's falling apart." "No," I said, "because nobody told you no until now. You spent 6 years thinking consequences were a betrayal instead of just consequences." He cursed at me and the call dropped. I blocked the new number too. The next morning, Grandpa forwarded me a handwritten note he'd received from Tyler, the letters leaning unevenly across a page torn out of a school notebook. "Grandpa Harold, why is everybody fighting? Did Aunt Nora leave because I'm not really her family?" I sat with that sentence until the screen blurred in front of me. Ryan had done exactly what he'd threatened in that voicemail. He'd let an 8-year-old believe the fracture in this family belonged to him. I called Grandpa that same hour. Together, we set up a protected education trust for Tyler, money that neither parent could touch for housing, cars, or debt, administered by an independent trustee, released only for school and medical expenses. I also wrote Tyler a letter of my own. I told him he was loved. I told him adults sometimes make choices that hurt people without meaning to hurt a child specifically. I didn't criticize his parents in it. I didn't explain the money. I just promised him that being related to someone isn't what makes them real family. Showing up with care does. By mid-December, the house had received one lowball offer. Chloe had moved with Tyler into her parents' place. Ryan was alone in rooms full of furniture they could no longer afford to keep or sell. My family kept telling anyone who'd listened that I had caused a collapse. The truth was harder to say out loud and harder still for them to hear. I hadn't caused anything. I had simply stopped standing underneath a weight that was never mine to carry. Christmas came quietly to my quarters at Bragg. My mornings started with dark early light and coffee before physical training. My evenings ended with Dr. Kurting. Racist questions still turning over in my head, or a call from Priya Anand, a sergeant in my old unit who'd become the closest thing I had to a sister these days. Priya never once asked how much my TSP account had grown, or whether my family had come around yet. She just showed up. That December, she talked me into a 5-mile run in 28-degree weather because, in her words, sitting inside with your phone is how officers turn into ghosts, ma'am. We ran until neither of us could feel our fingers, and it was, somehow, one of the best mornings of that whole year. Between those runs, updates about Ryan arrived indirectly, filtered through cousins and my mother's careful phrasing. Chloe had formally filed for divorce after discovering Ryan had opened a new line of credit without telling her. The house eventually sold through a short sale that left them with no equity and damaged credit on both names. The worst update came 2 days before Christmas. Ryan had been drinking when he drove to pick up Tyler for his scheduled evening. Chloe refused to let their son leave with him and called the police when Ryan started shouting in her parents' driveway. Officers on scene administered a field sobriety test. Ryan blew well over the legal limit. He wasn't arrested that night, but the incident was documented in full, and it followed him straight into family court. At an emergency hearing, Chloe was granted temporary primary custody and Ryan's visits became supervised, contingent on completing a court-mandated counseling program and demonstrating sustained sobriety. He called Grandpa that same afternoon asking for an emergency loan to hire a more aggressive attorney. Grandpa refused. According to Grandpa, Ryan told him, "You're choosing Nora over your own grandson." Grandpa's answer, relayed to me almost word for word, "I'm choosing the safety of my great-grandson over the pride of a grown man who won't admit what he's become." My parents stopped defending Ryan after that phone call. They'd already moved into a modest 2-bedroom condo and were learning, slowly, to live within their pension and savings. My father picked up part-time bookkeeping work for a contractor 3 mornings a week, something he told me, almost shyly, that he found he was good at. My mother complained less after enrolling in a community senior program and discovering that a lot of retirees lived perfectly full lives without marble lobbies or private dining rooms. They didn't transform overnight into different people. But their messages changed. They stopped asking me to fix Ryan. They started apologizing for specific things instead of vague ones. The tuition they paid for Ryan while telling me to find scholarships on my own. The graduations and promotion ceremonies they'd missed because I was the easy one, who never complained. The silence in that lodge lobby that I now understood had cost them more than they'd ever admit out loud. I accepted those apologies without pretending trust had simply come rushing back. Dr. Reyes had taught me that forgiveness and access were 2 entirely separate decisions, and you were allowed to grant one without granting the other. My own life, meanwhile, moved in the opposite direction. I took command of my company in January. My retirement portfolio crossed a milestone I'd been working toward since my first appointment. On weekends, Priya and I hiked the trails outside base, and she never once asked what my family thought about any choice I made. The ordinary parts of those days felt more luxurious to me than any lodge on any lake ever could. Grandpa mailed me a small package that Christmas. Inside was a set of silver dog tags that had belonged to my grandmother's brother, killed in Korea, along with a note in Grandpa's precise, blocky handwriting. "You didn't break this family, Nora. You stopped lying about where it was already broken. Independence isn't the absence of love." For Tyler, I mailed a model rocket kit, a beginner's book on saving money written for kids, and a folded paper napkin exactly like the one I'd drawn that little tree on years earlier. I sent everything through Grandpa so Ryan couldn't use the gift as a reason to contact me directly. In the letter I included, I wrote, "Real family never asks you to prove your love by accepting disrespect." On Christmas night, Grandpa called to tell me Tyler had read that sentence out loud twice. Then he asked whether I thought Ryan would ever really understand it. I looked out the window of my quarters at the cold parking lot lights and answered honestly, "But understanding someone doesn't replace her." That was the lesson I was still learning month by month. A person can change and apologize and slowly become someone better. And you can still decide, with a clear conscience, that the safest place for them is somewhere outside your daily life. By the end of January, the crisis had stopped being loud. It had simply become the new shape of things. My parents lived inside a written monthly budget for the first time in decades. Chloe found part-time administrative work while Tyler settled into public school and, according to his teacher, made 2 new friends within the first week. Grandpa finalized Tyler's education trust with an independent trustee, every dollar routed directly to schools or medical providers, untouchable by either parent. Ryan stayed in a small studio apartment near his office, attended his court-ordered counseling twice a week, and saw Tyler on supervised Saturday afternoons. Then, in early February, an email arrived from him. No demands this time, no relatives copied on it, no request for money anywhere in the text. Nora, I call you useless because your independence made me feel small. Every time Grandpa praised you, I heard it as proof I'd failed. I built a life I couldn't actually afford, and instead of admitting that, I treated your restraint like it was a weakness I needed to punish. At the lodge, I expected you to just quietly pay for another room and protect me from looking cruel in front of everyone. When you left instead, I blamed you, because blaming you was easier than looking at what I'd actually become. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't restore anything. For once, Ryan had written the truth without attaching a price tag to it. I waited 3 days before replying. I accept that you understand what you did. I hope you keep doing the work, for Tyler's sake if nothing else. I'm not ready to have a relationship with you, and I won't be discussing Grandpa's financial decisions with you either. He answered with a single line. I understand, that was all. Some people might call my response cold. I call it a boundary. An apology can acknowledge a debt honestly. It doesn't obligate the person who was harmed to reopen to impress a stranger. He told me he'd revised his estate plan not to reward me for what happened at the lodge, he was careful to say, but to prevent the same kind of dependence from ever taking root again. My parents would receive a controlled income fund instead of open-ended support. Tyler's trust would stay protected regardless of what happened between his parents. Ryan would inherit nothing he could access directly until he demonstrated several consecutive years of financial stability and sobriety, verified through the same trustee managing Tyler's account. Grandpa had also donated a portion of the estate to a scholarship fund for veterans working their way through college without family support, something that made me put my fork down for a second. You once told me money should create freedom, I said. It should, he answered, but only when it's paired with character. One without the other is just a longer leash. After dinner, we walked back toward my quarters in the cold, and I thought about the woman who had stood in that lodge lobby holding a duffel bag while her own family decided on camera that she was somehow less real because she needed them less than everyone else did. She had believed in that moment that walking away meant losing everyone. In reality, it had shown her, with total clarity, exactly which relationships had ever actually been safe. Paused. I didn't get the homecoming weekend they planned for me. I got something I hadn't known I needed more. The engineers in trainees, the engineers in training, the engineers in training, or EITs, the engineers in training, the engineers in training, including her own family's disrespect, without complaint. I was simply Nora. And I was allowed to walk out of any room, in any uniform, where my dignity had been treated as optional. Money can buy a hotel suite, a leased SUV, a private school, a convincing photograph for a banner over a lodge entrance. It cannot buy discipline, or loyalty, or self-respect. Ryan lost his house, his marriage, his reputation, and temporary custody of his own son because he built every part of his adult life on borrowed money and borrowed importance. I didn't take any of that from him. His own choices did. Chuckles, soft. Grandpa asked me near the end of that visit whether I thought he'd done the right thing, cutting everyone off the way he had all at once in front of everybody. On a video call, decided, hadn't you? Before I even got on that plane home. He was quiet for a moment, and then he gave me a small, tired smile. I'd had the paperwork drafted since March, Nora. Before your deployment even started, I just needed a moment I couldn't argue myself out of using. You gave me that moment. I'm not going to pretend otherwise to either one of us. I sat with that for a long time. Part of me went cold at the idea that I'd been, in some sense, the trigger he'd been waiting for. A tool in a plan that started long before Ryan ever raised his phone in that lobby. But another part of me understood him completely because I recognized the instinct. It was the same instinct that had kept me alive overseas. You don't move on a target until the moment gives you a clean shot, one you can defend later. One that doesn't leave collateral damage you'll have to answer for. Grandpa hadn't used me. He'd waited for the truth to become undeniable to everyone, including himself, before he acted on what he already knew. That's not manipulation. That's discipline, the same kind the army had spent a decade building into me. I told him that, more or less. He nodded slowly, the way he used to when I was young, and finally understood a lesson he hadn't wanted to have to spell out for me twice. Spring came to Fort Bragg the way it always does, all at once, the pine trees suddenly loud with birds. On the first clear morning in April, I took the unused itinerary from that homecoming weekend. I'd kept it folded in a drawer for months without really knowing why, and fed it into the shredder in my office. Then I opened the window and let the cold morning air move through the room. Somewhere in Traverse City, Tyler was probably getting ready for school, backpack over one shoulder, a folded paper napkin with a crooked apple tree drawn on it tucked into a side pocket where he kept things that mattered to him. Somewhere else, Ryan was probably getting ready for another supervised Saturday, learning slowly, the hard way, what it means to earn something back instead of simply being handed it. And I was here, in a uniform I'd fought hard to wear honestly, about to walk out and lead a company of soldiers who trusted me because I'd never once asked them to be less than capable on my behalf. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do to the people who hurt you isn't to destroy them. It's simply to stop standing underneath the weight of consequences that were never yours to carry in the first place. If you're the one in your family who never asks for help, who gets called selfish for building something steady, who gets left off the list because everyone assumes you'll be fine either way, I want you to hear this clearly. Being fine on your own was never a reason to be treated as optional. And leaving a room that doesn't respect you isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only order left worth following. This story is a work of fiction, inspired by the real experiences service members and their families sometimes carry quietly, and it's offered here for reflection, not as any single person's real account. If any part of it found you tonight, I hope it reminds you that you can love your family completely and still decide without guilt. That loving them from a careful distance is sometimes the most honest thing you can do. Distance isn't always the end of love. Sometimes it's just the beginning of finally protecting it.